She walked through those glass doors at exactly 9 in the morning, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with confidence, her natural hair styled in elegant locks that fell past her shoulders. The receptionist looked up, smiled briefly, then returned to her computer screen. What happened in the next 45 minutes would change everything for the people working in that building, because the woman they were about to turn away wasn't just another job applicant. She was the one person in that entire company who could make or break every single career in that office with just one phone call. Before we continue with what happened next, let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. Are you in the United States, maybe New York, Los Angeles, or Chicago? Or perhaps you're tuning in from the UK, London, Manchester, Birmingham. Drop your city below because this story is resonating with people all around the world, and the conversation we need to have affects every single one of us, no matter where we live. Now, let's get back to what unfolded that morning. She had built her company from absolutely nothing. 12 years ago, she was working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on in her tiny apartment. She cleaned offices at night, worked retail during the day, and spent every spare moment teaching herself coding and business management through free online courses. She saved every dollar she could, ate instant noodles for dinner more times than she could count, and sacrificed every comfort most people take for granted. When she finally scraped together enough money to start her tech consulting firm, people laughed at her. Investors turned her away. Banks rejected her loan applications, but she kept going. She started with 1 client, then 2, then 10. Her company grew because she delivered results that nobody else could match. She hired people who had been overlooked by other companies. She built something real, something solid, something that changed lives. 15 months ago, she made the decision to acquire a struggling marketing firm downtown. The company had potential but terrible management. She saw opportunity where others saw failure. She purchased it through a subsidiary company, keeping her ownership private while she evaluated the existing team. She wanted to see how the company really operated before making her presence known. She wanted to understand the culture, the problems, the people. So she stayed in the shadows, watching, learning, planning. And what she discovered during those 15 months made her blood boil. The reports came to her desk every month. The diversity numbers were appalling. The promotion rates for women and people of color were practically non-existent. The salary gaps were unconscionable, but numbers on a page only tell part of the story. She needed to see it with her own eyes, so she created a test. She would apply for a mid-level management position at her own company under a different name. She would walk in as a qualified candidate and see exactly how her employees treated someone who looked like her when they thought nobody important was watching. The hiring manager's name was Derek Mitchell. He had been with the company for 8 years, working his way up from sales associate to regional hiring manager. His office was on the 4th floor, decorated with motivational posters and photos of himself at various company events. He had conducted over 300 interviews during his tenure. He considered himself an excellent judge of character. He prided himself on his ability to spot talent within the first 5 minutes of meeting someone. What he didn't realize was that his judgment had been failing spectacularly for years, and this morning, his failures were about to catch up with him in the most devastating way possible. She arrived 15 minutes early for her scheduled 9:30 interview. The receptionist, a young woman named Amanda, asked her to sign in and take a seat. She sat in the waiting area, observing everything. The office was busy. People rushed past, carrying folders and coffee cups. Nobody made eye contact with her. 20 minutes passed, then 30. At 10 o'clock, she approached the reception desk again. "Excuse me," she said politely. "I had a 9:30 appointment with Derek Mitchell. Has there been any word?" Amanda barely looked up from her screen. "He's running behind. Just keep waiting." Another 20 minutes crawled by. She watched 3 other candidates arrive for later time slots. All three were called back within 5 minutes of their arrival. All three were white. 2 were men, 1 was a woman. The pattern was impossible to miss. At 10:40, she approached the desk again. "I've been waiting over an hour," she said, keeping her voice calm but firm. "Can you please check on the status of my interview?" Amanda sighed dramatically, picked up the phone, and had a brief conversation. When she hung up, her expression had shifted to something almost apologetic, but not quite. "Mr. Mitchell says he's going to have to reschedule. Something urgent came up." "I see," she replied. "When would he like to reschedule?" "He said someone from HR will call you." She didn't move. She stood there, looking directly at Amanda, waiting. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Amanda shifted in her seat. "Is there something else?" "Yes," she said quietly. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Mitchell directly, just for a moment. He's really busy right now. I'll wait." The firmness in her voice made Amanda pick up the phone again. This time, the conversation was longer. Amanda's expression changed multiple times during the call. When she finally hung up, she wouldn't meet the woman's eyes. "He'll be right out." Derek Mitchell emerged from the hallway 7 minutes later. He was tall, in his early 40s, with graying hair at his temples and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't extend his hand for a handshake. He didn't apologize for the wait. He simply stood there, arms crossed, looking at her with barely concealed impatience. "I understand you wanted to speak with me," he said. "As I told my receptionist, something urgent came up. We'll need to reschedule your interview." "I've been sitting in your lobby for over an hour," she replied calmly. "I watched 3 other candidates arrive after me and get called back immediately. I'm curious what kind of emergency would allow you to interview them but not me." Derek's jaw tightened. "I don't appreciate your tone. The interview process is at my discretion. If you have a problem with that, you're welcome to withdraw your application. I'm not questioning your authority, Mr. Mitchell. I'm questioning your integrity." The lobby had gone quiet. Amanda was staring at her computer screen, pretending not to listen. 2 employees who had been walking past had stopped, frozen, clearly trying to hear what was happening. Derek's face was turning red. "Excuse me, you heard me correctly," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Every word was clear and deliberate. "I submitted my resume 3 weeks ago. My qualifications exceed the job requirements. I have 15 years of experience in this industry, including management positions at 2 Fortune 500 companies. I have an MBA from a top-tier university. I was invited to this interview. I arrived on time, and I've been sitting in your lobby being ignored while less qualified candidates were seen immediately. So I'll ask you directly, Mr. Mitchell, is there a specific reason why you don't want to interview me? Your attitude is reason enough." Derek snapped. "This company values team players, not troublemakers who cause scenes in the lobby. I caused a scene by asking why I'm being treated differently than other candidates. You're being paranoid. Not everything is about race." The words hung in the air like a grenade. She didn't react, didn't show any emotion. She simply looked at him steadily, letting his words speak for themselves. "Interesting," she said finally. "I never mentioned race, Mr. Mitchell." "You did." Derek realized his mistake immediately. His eyes widened slightly, and he tried to backtrack. "That's not what I meant. I meant, what did you mean? Look, this clearly isn't a good fit. We're moving forward with other candidates. Thank you for your interest in our company." "Other candidates who look like you mean?" "I don't have to stand here and be accused of discrimination," Derek said, his voice rising. "This interview is over. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'll leave," she said quietly, "but this conversation isn't over. Not by a long shot." She walked out of that building with her head high, her expression neutral. She waited until she was in her car, parked 3 blocks away before she pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From pure, concentrated anger. She had suspected what she would find, but experiencing it firsthand was different. Feeling that contempt, that dismissal, that casual cruelty, it ignited something in her that had been building for 15 months. She made 3 phone calls. The first was to her attorney, a woman named Patricia Chen, who had been her friend since college. Patricia listened to the entire story without interrupting, then said just 5 words, "Let me handle this immediately." The second call was to her chief operating officer, Marcus Williams. Marcus had been with her since the early days. He was family. When she told him what happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want a full audit of every hiring decision Derek Mitchell has made in the past 5 years. I want salary data, promotion data, and termination data for his entire department. I want to know every single thing he's done since he started working there, and I want it by tomorrow morning." "You'll have it by tonight," Marcus replied. The third call was to her head of human resources, Janet Morrison. Janet had been trying to address the diversity issues at the acquired company for months, but she'd been blocked at every turn by middle management. When she heard what happened, her voice turned ice cold. "I warned you about him. I sent you 3 separate reports about complaints filed against him. Every single one was buried by his supervisor." "Who's his supervisor?" "Thomas Bradley, Senior Vice President of Operations." "Set up a meeting with Thomas for tomorrow afternoon. Don't tell him why. Just tell him I need to discuss quarterly numbers." That evening, she sat in her home office and read through the date Marcus sent her. It was worse than she imagined. Derek Mitchell had interviewed 247 candidates in the past 5 years. He had hired 63 people, 58 of them were white, 4 were Asian. 1 was Hispanic, 0 were black. Not a single black person had been hired by Derek Mitchell in 5 years, despite the fact that dozens of qualified black candidates had applied and interviewed. The salary data was equally damning. Women in his department earned on average 17% less than men in equivalent positions. The 2 women of color in his department were the lowest paid employees at their level in the entire company. The promotion patterns told the same story. White men moved up quickly. Everyone else stalled out. But the most disturbing information came from the complaint files that Janet had tried to escalate. Over the past 5 years, 11 different employees or candidates had filed complaints about Derek Mitchell. They complained about inappropriate questions during interviews. They complained about hostile work environment issues. They complained about discriminatory comments and behavior. Every single complaint had been dismissed or minimized. Derek had received verbal warnings twice, but faced no real consequences. His supervisor, Thomas Bradley, had defended him every single time, calling him one of our best people, and dismissing the complaints as misunderstandings or people being too sensitive. She barely slept that night. She kept thinking about all the people Derek had turned away, all the careers he had damaged, all the talent that had been wasted because one man in a position of power had decided that people who didn't look like him weren't worth his time. She thought about how many other Derek Mitchells existed in companies across the country, making these same decisions every single day, protected by systems that valued comfort over justice. The next morning, she dressed in a charcoal gray suit with a deep purple blouse. She wore her hair up this time, elegant and professional. She put on the diamond earrings her grandmother had given her, the ones she wore when she needed to feel powerful. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the fury in her own eyes. She arrived at the office at exactly 2 o'clock. This time, she didn't go through the lobby. She used the executive entrance on the 5th floor, the one that required a special keycard. The security guard, Robert, recognized her immediately. His eyes went wide. "Ma'am, I didn't know you were coming today." "Does Mr. Bradley know? He will in about 5 minutes." She replied with a tight smile. She walked through the executive corridor. Assistants and managers looked up from their desks, confusion and recognition dawning on their faces. Word spread through the office like wildfire. The owner was here. The actual owner. Something was happening. Thomas Bradley's assistant tried to stop her, but she walked right past, opened his office door without knocking, and stepped inside. Thomas was on the phone. When he saw her, he nearly dropped the receiver. "I'll call you back," he said quickly, hanging up. He stood up, smoothing his tie, plastering on a smile. "Ms. Johnson, what a surprise. If I had known you were coming, I would have—" "Sit down, Thomas." Her voice stopped him mid-sentence. He sat. "I want Derek Mitchell in this office right now," she said, "and I want every member of the HR team here as well. You have 5 minutes. I don't understand. What's this about? You have 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Thomas scrambled to make the calls. Within 6 minutes, the office was full. Derek Mitchell walked in last, looking confused and slightly annoyed at being summoned. When he saw her standing there, his expression shifted through several emotions: confusion, recognition, and then absolute horror as he realized who she was. "You," he whispered. "Me," she confirmed. "Though we weren't properly introduced yesterday, my name is Jasmine Johnson. I'm the owner of this company, the person who signs your paycheck, the person you refused to interview yesterday because you decided, within seconds of seeing me in your lobby, that I wasn't worth your time." The room was dead silent. Derek's face had gone pale. Thomas looked like he might be sick. "I want to be very clear about what happened yesterday," she continued, her voice steady and controlled. "I applied for a position at my own company under a different name. I submitted a resume that was more than qualified for the position. I was invited for an interview. I showed up on time, and I was made to wait for over an hour while other candidates, all of whom were white, were seen immediately. When I finally spoke with Mr. Mitchell, he refused to interview me and told me to leave. When I asked why I was being treated differently, he told me I was being paranoid, and that not everything is about race. Then he had me escorted out of the building." She pulled out her phone and held it up. "I recorded the entire conversation. Every word is documented. But more importantly, I had my team pull every piece of data related to Mr. Mitchell's hiring decisions over the past 5 years. Derek, in 5 years, you have not hired a single black person, not one. You've interviewed dozens of qualified black candidates, and somehow, miraculously, none of them were ever good enough. Meanwhile, you hired multiple white candidates with fewer qualifications, less experience, and in some cases, no relevant background at all." Derek tried to speak, but she held up her hand. "I'm not finished. The women in your department earn significantly less than the men in equivalent positions. The employees of color earn even less. You've had 11 complaints filed against you for discriminatory behavior and hostile work environment issues. 11, and every single time, Thomas here defended you, minimized the complaints, protected you." She turned to Thomas Bradley. "You knew, the data was there, the complaints were there. HR flagged this multiple times, and you did nothing because Derek was hitting his numbers, and you didn't want to deal with the mess. You valued profit over people. You valued comfort over justice, and now you're both done." "You can't fire me over one bad day," Derek said desperately. "I've been here for 8 years. I've brought in millions of dollars in revenue. One interview mistake doesn't erase all of that." "You're right," she said coldly. "One interview doesn't erase your record. Your record does that all by itself. You created a pattern of discrimination that spans 5 years. You cost this company untold amounts of talent and innovation. You created a hostile environment for women and people of color. You violated company policy, federal employment law, and basic human decency. So yes, Derek, I can fire you, and I am." She turned to Thomas. "You're finished too. You enabled this behavior. You protected him. You ignored multiple warnings from HR. You created a culture where discrimination was tolerated as long as the numbers looked good. That ends today." Janet Morrison, who had been standing quietly near the door, stepped forward. "Security is waiting outside to escort them out. HR has prepared all the necessary termination paperwork." Derek's face crumpled. "Please, I have a mortgage. I have kids in private school. I need this job." She looked at him without sympathy. "Yesterday, you looked at me and decided I wasn't worth 15 minutes of your time. You made that decision based solely on how I looked. You never even glanced at my qualifications. You never gave me a chance. How many other people did you do that to? How many careers did you damage? How many dreams did you crush? Did you think about their mortgages, their families? I made a mistake, Derek said, his voice breaking. People make mistakes. This doesn't define who I am. No, she said quietly. This is exactly who you are. This is who you've been for years. The only difference is that yesterday, you did it to someone who had the power to hold you accountable. Think about how many people you did this to who didn't have that power. Think about all the people who walked out of this building feeling exactly the way you made me feel yesterday, but they had no recourse, no voice, no way to fight back. You made your choices, Derek. Now you get to live with the consequences. Security escorted Derek Mitchell and Thomas Bradley out of the building that afternoon. By 5 o'clock, every employee in the company knew what had happened. By 6 o'clock, the story was spreading through industry networks. By the next morning, it was everywhere. She called an all-staff meeting 3 days later. The auditorium was packed. People stood in the back when the seats ran out. She walked onto the stage and looked out at the sea of faces, concerned, curious, some hopeful, some afraid. 3 days ago, I fired 2 members of senior leadership, she began. Some of you know the full story. Others have heard pieces. I want you to hear it from me directly. She told them everything, the interview, the recordings, the data, the pattern of discrimination that had been allowed to flourish. When she finished, the room was silent. This company has a choice to make, she said. We can be the kind of place where discrimination is tolerated as long as the numbers look good. Or we can be the kind of place where everyone, regardless of race, gender, or background, has a fair shot at success. I didn't build this company to perpetuate the same systems that tried to keep me down. I built it to create something better, but I can't do that alone. Every single person in this room has to make that choice too. She announced immediate changes, mandatory bias training for all managers, an external audit of hiring practices, a new oversight committee to review discrimination complaints, transparent salary data, clear promotion criteria, accountability measures. Change is hard, she said. Change is uncomfortable. Some of you might not like these new policies. Some of you might even decide to leave. That's your choice. But if you stay, you're committing to building something better than what we had. You're committing to creating a workplace where talent matters more than connections, where opportunity is based on merit, and where everyone has a fair chance to succeed. The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. People stood. Some were crying. She saw faces in the crowd, black faces, brown faces, women who had been passed over for promotions, people who had filed complaints that went nowhere, and she saw hope in their eyes, real hope, the kind that comes from finally being heard. In the months that followed, the company transformed, hiring practices changed, promotion patterns shifted, the culture began to heal. It wasn't easy. Some people resigned rather than adapt to the new policies. But the people who stayed built something remarkable. Productivity increased, innovation flourished, employee satisfaction soared, and the company that had been struggling when she acquired it became one of the most sought-after employers in the industry. Derek Mitchell never worked in management again. His firing became a cautionary tale shared in HR departments and diversity training seminars across the country. Thomas Bradley took a job at a small firm in another state and kept his head down. They became examples of what happens when discrimination is finally held accountable. She continued to run her company with the same principles that had guided her from the beginning: fairness, opportunity, and the radical belief that everyone deserves a chance to prove what they can do. She never forgot what it felt like to sit in that lobby, being ignored, being dismissed, being treated as less than. She used that memory as fuel to build something better. And she made sure that no one who worked for her would ever have to feel that way again. This story spread far beyond her company. It became a conversation starter about bias in hiring, about who gets opportunities and who doesn't, about the invisible barriers that exist in workplaces across the country. Some people celebrated what she did. Others criticized it, calling it a publicity stunt or an overreaction. She didn't care about the critics. She cared about the young woman who emailed her saying she had stopped applying to jobs after too many rejections. But this story gave her hope to try again. She cared about the manager who reached out saying he had examined his own hiring practices and realized he had been perpetuating the same patterns. She cared about creating real change, one company at a time. Years later, when people asked her about that day, she always gave the same answer. I didn't do anything special. I just held someone accountable for their actions. The real question is why that's still so rare. Why are we still surprised when discrimination has consequences? That's the conversation we should be having. And that conversation continues today, in offices and boardrooms and hiring decisions happening right now, all around the world. Because the story of what happened in that lobby wasn't just about one woman and one manager. It was about the thousands of similar stories that happen every single day, most of which never get told, never get addressed, never get resolved. It was about power, privilege, accountability, and the courage it takes to demand better. She changed one company, but the story changed thousands of minds, and sometimes that's where real transformation begins. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever experienced discrimination or witnessed it, if you believe workplaces can and should be better, leave a comment below. Share your city, share your thoughts, share your own experiences. These conversations matter, your voice matters, and together we can keep pushing for the change that's long overdue.